On the 8th anniversary of our marriage, I was driving my daughter to school when my phone rang. It was a follow-up call from a luxury hotel. "Is this Mr. Julian Vance? Your wife, Chloe, left her diamond ring in the penthouse suite." I froze. Julian Vance was my husband. Chloe Sinclair was my best friend. Panic clawing at my chest, I rushed to my brother, Nathan, begging him to help me look into it. But Nathan wasn't surprised at all. He just looked at me with a calm, pitying expression and sighed. "Summer, they already have a child together. Just pretend you don't know. Julian was only trying to protect you. That's why he asked us to keep it from you." A cold sweat broke out over my entire body. Before I could process his words, someone else chimed in. "He's right, Summer. Don't blame Chloe. You're both mothers. Try to show her some empathy." The speaker was my sister-in-law, Penny. She was also supposed to be my other best friend. And now, she was telling me to forgive a mistress and her bastard child. It turned out that in family, friendship, and love, I was nothing but an outsider. Seeing the dead silence in my eyes, Nathan tried to persuade me with a heavy heart. "Summer, you're not young anymore. Besides, you have Lily to think about. Take my advice. Close one eye and get on with it. A compromised marriage is still better than ending up single and lonely." This was my own brother, my flesh and blood. And here he was, actively helping my husband deceive me. Penny stood beside him, gently grabbing my wrist with a practiced, placating smile. "Exactly, Summer. At our age, where are you going to find the leverage to start over?" Chloe didn't have a choice back then. When her family went bankrupt and got buried in debt, she was cornered by shady loan sharks. Julian bailed her out. She had nothing to offer in return, so she could only... A sharp pain stabbed through my chest. Since our college days, Penny, Chloe, and I had been inseparable. We had sworn to be sisters for life. But now, knowing full well that Chloe was the homewrecker, she was still taking her side. People are biased. It didn't matter that I had once taken a bottle to the head and got 8 stitches to save Penny from a group of thugs. None of it mattered now. I violently shook off her hand and said coldly, "Penny, from this day on, we are done." She gasped, startled. Before she could speak, the office door was flung open. Julian walked in, his face dark with fury. He stared straight at me. Nathan and Penny quickly took the hint and slunk out of the room. Only the two of us were left in the tense silence. Julian walked up to me, his voice deep and demanding. "Summer, what exactly are you trying to achieve by making a scene here?" In all the years we had known each other, this was the first time he had ever looked at me with such cold indifference. Swallowing the lump in my throat, I choked out, "Julian, what did I ever do to deserve this? You've been sleeping with my best friend behind my back, and you even have a kid with her?" Seeing the tears in my eyes, Julian's expression softened slightly. He sighed, pulling me into his arms. "Summer, don't worry. She will never replace you." My eyes stung. I stubbornly pushed him away. I refused to share my husband with another woman. Julian's brows furrowed, his patience thinning. "Summer, if we go to court, I will fight for Lily's custody with everything I have. You know how that will end. Do you really want her to suffer poverty with you?" I stared at him, my mind blank. The boy I had loved since we were teenagers was now threatening to strip me of my daughter. Seeing me hesitate, Julian's tone softened a fraction. "Just live your life quietly. You and Lily will be taken care of forever. To the world, you will still be the glamorous Mrs. Vance." I hid my resolve deep inside and nodded slowly. From that day on, I pretended everything was back to normal. I picked Lily up from school, cooked, and smiled. I stopped questioning Julian when he stayed out all night. I stopped leaving the porch light on for him. Instead, I quietly hired an investigator to gather evidence of his infidelity. Until one day, a familiar figure appeared at my door. It was Chloe. We hadn't seen each other in a long time. She looked slightly anxious, standing on my driveway. For years, I had genuinely believed Chloe had a hard life. When she got pregnant out of wedlock a few years ago, she lived alone. I felt so sorry for her that I practically raised her child myself, buying most of the baby supplies. I had even begged Julian to help her out financially. Looking back, it was a joke. They didn't need my permission to be together. Chloe stepped forward, her voice soft. "Summer, can we talk?" I stopped in my tracks and looked at her blankly. "Say what you have to say." She bit her lower lip, glancing nervously at the passers-by, and whispered, "Things weren't supposed to go this far. Julian and we've been together for years. The kids are growing up. I just want us to coexist peacefully. I never wanted to ruin your life. But love is something we can't control." Listening to her pathetic excuses, I let out a dry, mocking laugh. "Cut the act, Chloe." I stared at her, a sudden realization hitting me. Julian cheated on me with you during my second month of pregnancy, on my birthday, didn't he? Chloe's pale face gave me all the answers I needed. On that birthday, Julian had promised to come home early. I had waited all night with a positive pregnancy test in my hand. He didn't return until dawn, covered in cuts and bruises. I had panicked, trying to take him to the ER, but he had pulled me tightly into his arms, whispering, Summer, don't move. Just let me hold you. I missed you so much. It wasn't love. It was just the guilt of his first betrayal. Every red flag I had ignored over the years began to flash in my mind. No wonder Chloe had moved to a new apartment right after that night. She had claimed she was being stalked and a good Samaritan had saved her. That savior was Julian. Summer, we can still be friends, Chloe said, reaching out to grab my hand like she used to. I flinched away. I let out a self-deprecating laugh. Friends? The kind who sleep with each other's husbands. Suddenly, a splash of cold water hit my face. Water dripped from my eyelashes. I looked up to see Penny standing there, holding an empty cup, her face flushed with anger. Summer, do you think Chloe is having an easy time? Privileged princesses like you will never understand what it's like to struggle. No wonder you've never had any real friends. A sharp pain stabbed at my heart. I swallowed my tears and forced myself to stay quiet. No. I couldn't ruin my plans now. Just then, Julian appeared. He handed me a napkin. His tone was patronizing, like he was dealing with a toddler throwing a tantrum. Summer, stop making a scene. Lily is waiting in the car. All my rage was sucked dry. Right. I still had my daughter. Now was not the time to blow everything up. As I turned to leave, a stray dog suddenly charged out of the bushes toward us. In a split second, Julian didn't hesitate. He threw his body over Chloe. He shielded her in his arms, shouting at the dog. Terrified by his yells, the dog swerved and knocked me to the pavement. I hit the ground hard, scraping my hands and knees. Fortunately, a security guard ran over and tackled the dog. Julian gently helped Chloe to her feet. He didn't even look at me as he muttered, "Are you okay?" Before I could answer, he added, "I'm taking Mia to the theme park tonight. I won't be home." The evening wind blew, freezing the sweat on my skin. I shouldn't have expected anything else. I dragged my bruised body to the car. As soon as I opened the door, Lily threw herself into my arms, her small voice filled with confusion. "Mommy, why did Daddy protect that lady instead of you? You were closer to the dog." Even a 5-year-old could see it, but he chose to be blind. Choking back my tears, I stroked her hair. "Because Daddy is farsighted, sweetie. He can only see things that are far away." My daughter nodded, trying to understand. For the next week, Julian didn't come home. Then out of the blue, he called me. "Summer, Chloe has been terribly sick lately. We've been to every hospital, but the doctors can't find anything physically wrong with her." Before I could speak, his voice turned ice cold. "I had a spiritual advisor look into it. He says the root of the problem is at the cemetery. Your mother's grave is too close to Chloe's mother's grave. The conflicting energies are making Chloe sick." My fingers gripped the phone so hard they went numb. "What are you talking about?" "Move your mother's grave." Julian's tone was completely matter-of-fact, devoid of any guilt. "Do it as soon as possible. Stop dragging Chloe's health down with your stubbornness." His words felt like a heavy blow to my chest, stealing the air from my lungs. When Chloe was in middle school, she and Penny used to come to my house all the time. My mother knew Chloe loved beef stew, so she made it for her every single time she visited. Later, when Chloe's mother died of illness, her family was already bankrupt and couldn't even afford a decent funeral. It was my savings that paid for her mother's burial. Neither my mother nor I had ever done her wrong. But now, she wouldn't let me live in peace, and she wouldn't even let my dead mother rest. I bit my lip, my voice trembling. "No way. My mother has been buried for years. She deserves to rest in peace. I will never move her grave." My refusal set Julian off. His voice boomed through the receiver, laced with disgust. "Summer, can you be reasonable for once? It's just relocating a coffin. Chloe's life is on the line, and you're still trying to play your petty games." He slammed the phone down. That afternoon, Julian took a crew to the cemetery. By the time I rushed there, everyone I loved was already standing by the plot. Nathan walked up to me, trying to play the peacemaker. "Summer, don't be so dramatic. It's just a grave relocation. The dead are already gone, but the living still have to survive." I looked at my brother, my heart freezing over. The last of my patience snapped. I marched forward and slapped Chloe across the face with everything I had. Her head snapped back. Instantly, tears welled in her eyes as she sobbed. "Julian, I didn't force him. I just felt so sick. A murderous rage flared in Julian's eyes. He grabbed my wrist, squeezing so hard I felt my bones creak. His voice was laced with venom. Summer, are you insane? How dare you put your hands on her? Nathan immediately stepped in, pinning my shoulders down. Summer, that's enough. Apologize to Chloe right now. Stop acting like a lunatic. I thrashed against his grip, screaming at the top of my lungs. A lunatic? Who is the lunatic here? I paid to bury her mother. I gave her everything. And what did she do? She destroyed my family, and now she wants to dig up my dead mother. Nathan, that's our mother in there. How can you let them do this? Rain began to pour from the sky. The heavy drops mingled with the tears streaming down my face. Nathan's face stiffened, but he remained stubborn. She's already dead, Summer. It's just a grave. Why do you have to make everything so difficult? With those words, the last thread of sibling love between us snapped. Julian looked at me, a brief flicker of hesitation passing through his eyes. But in the next second, Chloe whimpered miserably. Summer is right. It's all my fault. I shouldn't even be alive. Julian panicked. To comfort his mistress, he looked at me cold-bloodedly. Since you slapped Chloe, you can watch your mother's grave get dug up as punishment. At his signal, several burly bodyguards stepped forward. They dragged me to the ground, forcing me onto my knees in the wet, cold mud. In front of me, the workers picked up their shovels and began to dig. The headstone bearing my mother's name slowly began to tilt. I shook violently, my tears washing away in the torrential rain as I begged, Julian, please. I'm begging you, stop. That's my mother.
She's gone.
She did nothing wrong. Chloe's illness has nothing to do with my mom. You know that. Please stop digging. I beg you. I threw away all my dignity, but Julian remained unmoved. Chloe leaned against his chest, a smug, triumphant smile playing on her lips. She did this on purpose. Kneeling in the mud before my mother's desecrated grave, I made a silent vow. Asterisk, I will never forgive them. Not in this life, not in the next. Asterisk. After that day, I fell gravely ill. Then, a frantic call came from Lily's school. The teacher's voice was trembling with panic. Mrs. Vance, you need to come to school right now. Lily got into a massive fight with another student. Both of them have run up to the roof of the building. It's extremely dangerous. My heart leaped into my throat, my limbs going weak. Lily was a gentle, sweet girl. She never fought with anyone. How could she end up on a rooftop? Without thinking, I got into my car and sped toward the school. I prayed with everything I had that my baby would be okay. I pushed open the heavy iron door of the rooftop, and the scene before me made my heart stop. The heavy rain from the night before had left the air sharp and biting. When I reached the school building, my lungs burned as I sprinted up 5 flights of stairs, ignoring the dull ache in my bruised knees and the lingering fever in my veins. I pushed open the heavy steel door leading to the roof. The howling wind instantly whipped my hair across my face. There, standing near the rusty perimeter railing, was 5-year-old Lily. Her small hands were trembling violently, clutching a tear-stained drawing to her chest. A few feet away stood Mia, wearing a pristine designer dress, sobbing loudly as 2 teachers tried desperately to talk them both down. Lily, I choked out, my voice cracking in the cold air. Lily turned her head. When she saw me, her eyes filled with fresh tears. Mommy, she took Grandma's picture and ripped it. She said Grandma is in the mud and that dirty ghosts don't get to have pictures. My heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. The drawing in Lily's hands was a pastel sketch of my mother, the last drawing Lily had made before my mother passed away. You're lying, Mia screamed, stamping her foot near the edge. My mommy said, your mommy is a loser. My daddy is going to buy us a mansion and you and your mommy are going to live on the street. He's my daddy. Lily cried out, stepping backward toward the steep drop. Her heel caught on a loose cable lying near the edge. She tottered backward. Lily, I shrieked, lunging forward without a second thought. At that exact second, the roof door slammed open again. Julian burst through, followed closely by a frantic Chloe. Julian didn't even look at Lily. His eyes locked onto Mia, who was standing 2 feet away from the safety barrier. Mia, he yelled, throwing himself across the wet concrete to pull Mia into his arms, shielding her as if a bomb were about to detonate. Meanwhile, Lily was falling. I threw my entire body onto the wet gravel, stretching my arm out as far as it would go. My fingers caught the strap of Lily's backpack just as her legs slipped off the ledge. The rough concrete scraped the skin off my elbows and palms, pain shooting straight up my arms. I gritted my teeth, ignoring the gush of blood, and hauled my daughter up with every ounce of strength left in my body. I pulled her into my chest, holding her so tightly I could feel her wildly, hammering heart against my ribs. We both lay there on the cold, wet roof, gasping for air. Mia, baby, are you okay? Did you get hurt? Julian's anxious voice cut through the wind. He was kneeling over Mia, inspecting her hands and face with gentle, trembling fingers. Chloe had wrapped her arms around both of them, weeping softly into Julian's shoulder. Not once did Julian look back to see if Lily had survived the fall. Lily lay in my arms, her small body completely still. She didn't cry anymore. She just stared at her father, at the man who had tucked her in every night, now holding another child with a tenderness he had never shown her. Mommy, Lily whispered, her voice eerily quiet. I'm here, baby. Mommy's here. I don't have a daddy anymore, right? I wiped the mud and tears from her pale face, my hand stained with my own blood. You have me, sweetie. You will always have me. Julian finally turned around, his eyes landing on us. Seeing the bloody scrapes on my arms and Lily's disheveled state, a brief flash of panic crossed his face. He stood up, taking a step toward us. Summer, is Lily all right? Lily buried her head into my neck, turning her back on him completely. I stood up slowly, lifting my daughter into my arms. I looked at Julian, at his polished suit, his expensive watch, his handsome face that I had adored for 15 years. Don't touch us, Mr. Vance, I said. My voice wasn't shaking. It wasn't angry. It was completely, utterly dead. Your daughter is right here. Go take care of her. Julian winced at the coldness in my tone. Summer, don't be like this. Mia was closer to the edge. Save it, I interrupted softly. Save it for the court. I turned around and carried Lily down the stairs, leaving him standing in the cold wind, surrounded by the lies he had built. For the next 2 weeks, I became the perfect, submissive wife Julian had always wanted. I didn't yell. I didn't ask where he spent his nights. I cooked breakfast, packed Lily's lunch, and smiled politely whenever he walked through the door. Julian was visibly relieved. He mistook my quietness for surrender. To him, the incident on the roof and the cemetery desecration had finally crushed my spirit. He assumed I was a woman who realized she had no money, no powerful family, and nowhere else to go. I knew you'd come to your senses, Summer, Julian said one evening, sliding a black credit card across the dining table. Buy yourself some clothes. Take Lily to the spa. As long as you stay quiet, you'll always be Mrs. Vance. I looked at the card, then looked up at him with a gentle, compliant smile. Thank you, Julian. As soon as he left for Chloe's apartment, my smile vanished. I picked up the black card and handed it to Mr. Harrison, the private investigator I had hired weeks ago. We met in a quiet coffee shop on the outskirts of the city. Mr. Harrison slid a thick manila folder across the table, his expression grave. Mrs. Vance, what I found goes far deeper than a simple extramarital affair. Mr. Harrison whispered. Your husband hasn't just been cheating on you. He and Chloe Sinclair have been systematically stripping your family's estate for the past 6 years. My eyes narrowed. What do you mean? Your late mother didn't just leave you that house in the suburbs, Harrison explained, pulling out financial bank statements. She owned a 30% silent stake in Vance Enterprises, shares your father left her before he died. When your mother passed away, those shares were meant to automatically transfer to you. He pointed to a signature on a series of transfer documents dated 5 years ago, right around the time I was bedridden with a high-risk pregnancy with Lily. Julian forged your signature on these transfer papers, Harrison continued. He transferred your mother's 30% stake into a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. And guess who the sole beneficiary of that shell company is? My hands tightened into fists under the table. Chloe Sinclair. Precisely. And that's not all, Harrison added, opening another file. Your brother, Nathan, and his wife, Penny, weren't just bystanders. Nathan's logistics company was used to launder the dividends from those shares. In exchange, Julian paid off Nathan's massive gambling debts and gave Penny a 5% cut of the shell company's annual profits. A cold, bitter laugh escaped my lips. My own brother sold out our mother's legacy and betrayed his own sister for gambling money. My best friend, Penny, sold her soul for a 5% cut of My stolen inheritance. And Chloe hadn't just taken my husband. She had been living off my mother's blood and sweat while pretending to be a penniless victim cornered by loan sharks. What about the grave? I asked, my voice terrifyingly calm. Why did she insist on digging up my mother's grave? Harrison sighed. I checked with the cemetery management and the city planning office. The plot where your mother was buried sits directly over a designated commercial development corridor for the new high-speed rail. The government is offering a massive buyout for that land, over $20 million. But because the land title was tied to your mother's estate, Julian couldn't claim the compensation unless the body was removed and the plot cleared. The puzzle pieces finally clicked into place. There was no bad energy. There was no spiritual illness. It was all greed. Cruel, grotesque, boundless greed. Mr. Harrison, I said, looking him dead in the eye. Can you freeze those offshore accounts if we file an emergency injunction for corporate fraud and document forgery? Harrison smiled faintly. If we present this evidence to the Federal Financial Crimes Division, not only will the accounts be frozen within hours, but every single person involved will be facing federal prison time. I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window at the gray sky. Good, I whispered. Let them enjoy their victory a little longer. Next week is Vance Enterprises' 10th anniversary gala, isn't it? The grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton was draped in gold and crystal. It was the 10th anniversary of Vance Enterprises, and the elite of the city had gathered to celebrate. Julian stood at the center of the room in a tailored tuxedo, surrounded by investors, politicians, and reporters. Beside him stood Chloe, wearing a breathtaking ruby dress and a massive diamond necklace, the very ring and jewels stolen from Julian's lavish spending. She floated through the crowd like the queen of the evening, sipping champagne and beaming as people complimented her role as the company's chief creative director. Nathan and Penny were there too, drinking expensive wine and boasting to business partners about their close ties to the Vance family. I sat at a quiet corner table near the back, wearing a simple black dress, holding a glass of iced water. To everyone who glanced my way, I looked like the tragic, faded wife who had been pushed into the shadows. Penny walked over to my table, holding a glass of wine, her eyes full of fake sympathy. Summer, I'm glad you came. You see? Isn't this better? Chloe is handling the high society stuff. Julian is happy, and you still get to live in a nice house. Everyone wins. I looked up at Penny, my expression unreadable. Does everyone win, Penny? Penny sneered softly, leaning down. Don't be bitter, Summer. Look at yourself. You have no career, no money of your own, and no influence. If you make a scene, Julian will throw you out with nothing. Just take your allowance and shut up. I didn't reply. I simply picked up my phone and sent a single text message. Execute. A moment later, the master of ceremonies stepped onto the main stage. Ladies and gentlemen, please direct your attention to the main screen as we play a special documentary honoring the visionary leadership of Mr. Julian Vance. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. The massive 4K LED screen behind the stage flickered to life. Julian stood near the front row, his glass held high, a proud smile on his face. Chloe leaned against his arm, ready to applaud. The audio boomed through the high-end speakers. But it wasn't a corporate documentary. It was a crystal-clear audio recording of Julian's voice, ringing out loudly across the room. Move your mother's grave. Do it as soon as possible. Stop dragging Chloe's health down with your stubbornness. The ballroom fell into a dead silence. Julian's glass froze midair. Chloe's smile vanished instantly. Before anyone could react, the audio transitioned into another voice, Nathan's voice. Summer, don't be so dramatic. It's just a grave relocation. The dead are already gone, but the living still have to survive. Julian paid off my gambling debts, so just let him have the land. Murmurs erupted through the crowd like wildfire. High society guests began whispering frantically, turning to stare at Julian, Nathan, and Chloe. What is the meaning of this? Turn it off. Turn it off now. Julian roared, his face turning bright red as he spun around to glare at the AV tech booth. The technician scrambled, but the system had been remotely locked. The screen shifted from audio to high-definition video. It was the footage from the cemetery. On the massive screen, the elite of the city watched in horror as 4 burly bodyguards dragged me down into the mud in front of my mother's headstone. They watched Julian holding Chloe safely under an umbrella while I begged on my knees, weeping in the pouring rain as workers dug up my mother's coffin. The video captured Chloe's face clearly, the cruel, triumphant smirk she had flashed at me while I was on my knees. Gasps of outrage echoed through the room. "My God, that's barbaric," a high-profile investor muttered loudly. "Is that how Mr. Vance treats his wife? Digging up her mother's grave for land. Money. Look at that woman beside him, smiling while another woman begs in the mud. Disgusting." Chloe's face drained of all color. She dropped her champagne glass, the crystal, shattering against the marble floor. Julian, make them stop." Julian rushed toward the stage, his eyes wildly searching the room until they landed on me. He marched toward my table, his face distorted with rage. "Summer, have you lost your mind?" he barked, lunging to grab my shoulder.
"You
ruined my event. I will ruin you for this." Before his hand could touch me, two heavy hands clamped onto his arms, pinning him back. Four uniformed officers from the Federal Financial Crimes Division, accompanied by 6 city police officers, stepped out from the shadows. "Julian Vance," the lead federal agent asked, holding up a badge and an arrest warrant. "You are under arrest for grand corporate fraud, forged securities, transfer, tax evasion, and money laundering." Julian froze, his breathing ragged.
"What?"
"That's ridiculous. Do you know who I?" "We know exactly who you are," the agent replied coldly. "We also have a warrant for Chloe Sinclair for co-conspiracy and illegal asset concealment, as well as Nathan Vance for commercial bribery and tax fraud." Nathan dropped his wine glass, his knees buckling as he fell to the floor.
No,
Wait. It wasn't me. It was Julian. He paid me." "Summer, tell them. I'm your brother." Nathan crawled toward me on his hands and knees, weeping hysterically, grabbing at the hem of my dress. "Summer, please. We share the same blood. Tell them I didn't do anything wrong. Save me." I looked down at my flesh and blood, the brother who had watched me get dragged through the mud, the brother who had let strangers desecrate our mother's rest. For money. I pulled my dress back from his hands, my voice as cold as ice. "When you sold our mother's grave, Nathan, you stopped being my brother." "Officer," I said, looking at the agent. "The evidence of his shell accounts is in folder B of the document package I submitted this morning." Nathan let out a despairing shriek as officers hauled him up and snapped handcuffs around his wrists. Penny stood paralyzed, shaking uncontrollably as an officer approached her. "Penny Vance, you are being named as an accomplice in offshore tax evasion. Please come with us."
Summer,
we were best friends," Penny screamed, tears ruining her heavy makeup as she was pulled away. "I took 8 stitches for you in college, remember? You owe me." I turned my head to look at Penny, my eyes dark. "I paid you back 8 stitches. Years ago, Penny. But you traded my life for 5% of a stolen company." Meanwhile, Chloe was weeping uncontrollably, hiding her face from the dozens of news cameras that had suddenly materialized at the back of the room, flashing rapidly. The media had been tipped off hours ago. By tomorrow morning, her face, her fake identity, and her cruelty would be broadcast across every major news network in the country. Julian was forced to his knees by the federal agents as they cuffed his hands behind his back. He stared up at me, the arrogance completely stripped from his face, replaced by a deep, terrifying panic. "Summer." He choked out, his voice trembling. "Summer, please think about
Lily.
If I go to prison, what will happen to the family? What will happen to our daughter?" I walked up to him slowly, stopping right in front of him. I leaned down, whispering close to his ear so only he could hear me. "Lily is safe," I whispered. "An hour ago, the family court granted me sole custody of Lily, based on the evidence of your domestic neglect, emotional abuse, and criminal indictment. You will never see her again." Julian's eyes widened in horror.
No.
"Summer, no. You can't do this to me.
I
loved you. Everything I did was for our future." "You didn't love me," I said softly. "You loved the control. And now you have nothing." The police dragged Julian, Chloe, Nathan, and Penny out through the grand doors of the Ritz-Carlton, surrounded by flashing cameras and shouting reporters. The ballroom was left in chaos, but to me, the world had suddenly become quiet and serene. 3 months later, the high-security visitation room at the state penitentiary smelled of disinfectant and rust. I sat on one side of the thick glass partition. A moment later, the door on the opposite side opened, and a guard led Julian in. He looked unrecognizable. The sleek, tailored suits were gone, replaced by a drab orange jumpsuit. His hair was messy, graying at the temples, and his face was hollow, dark circles bruised under his eyes. He picked up the phone with shaking hands. I picked up mine. Summer. His voice crackled through the receiver, small and broken. You
Came.
I came to deliver the final papers, I said calmly, sliding a document against the glass. The corporate liquidators have finished restoring my mother's 30% stake in Vance Enterprises. Since the remaining shares were seized to pay off your federal fines and back taxes, I now hold the controlling majority of the company. Julian closed his eyes, a tear slipping down his cheek. The company, my father built that company. And you destroyed it, I replied. Vance Enterprises is being rebranded tomorrow under my mother's maiden name. Your name has been completely erased from the board, the records, and the building. Julian slammed his fist weakly against the glass. What about Chloe?
Did you
Know what she did? He spat, his voice turning bitter. The moment we got arrested, her lawyers tried to put all the blame on me. She claimed I forced her into everything. She never loved me, Summer. She was sleeping with her offshore accountant the entire time. I listened to his rant with total indifference. Chloe had been sentenced to 12 years for financial fraud and grand larceny. Nathan was serving 8 years. Penny had lost her home, her reputation, and was facing bankruptcy from civil lawsuits. They had turned on each other like wild dogs in a cage, tearing each other apart to save their own skin. It doesn't matter, Julian, I said softly. You chose her. You knelt in the mud for her. You desecrated my mother for her. You deserve each other. Julian sobbed, leaning his forehead against the cold glass. Summer, please.
I was wrong.
I was blind. I wake up every night in this cell, remembering how I treated you, how I hurt Lily. Please, let me see Lily once. Just 5 minutes. I'm her father. I looked at him, my heart completely untroubled by his tears. Lily asked me about you yesterday, I said. Julian lifted his head, a desperate glimmer of hope in his eyes. What did she say? She asked if we could change her last name, I said calmly. She said she didn't want the name of the man who pushed her mommy in the mud. Her legal name is now Lily Sinclair, my mother's maiden name. Julian froze. The hope in his eyes shattered into utter despair. She doesn't remember you as her father, Julian, I continued, standing up from my chair. To her, you're just the far-sighted man who could only see things that were far away until he lost everything right in front of him. I hung up the telephone. Julian beat his fists against the glass, screaming my name, his voice muted, behind the thick acrylic, as the guards pulled him back and dragged him through the dark steel doors. I walked out of the prison into the bright, warm afternoon sun. Spring had arrived. The air was sweet with the scent of blooming cherry blossoms. On a peaceful hill overlooking the sea, a brand new marble headstone stood under the shade of an ancient oak tree. The surrounding grass was lush and green, swept clean of any dirt or debris. The headstone bore my mother's name, elegantly carved, surrounded by fresh white lilies. I knelt down, gently placing a bouquet of fresh flowers at the base of the
Stone.
Mom, I whispered, smiling as the warm sea breeze blew through my hair.
You can rest now.
No one will ever disturb you again. Footsteps crunched softly on the grass behind me. I turned around to see Lily running up the hill, wearing a yellow sundress, holding a bright watercolor painting in her hands. Mommy, look. Lily cheered, proudly holding up the drawing. It was a picture of 3 people standing under a bright yellow sun. My mother, me, and Lily, all holding hands, smiling under a rainbow. It's beautiful, baby, I said, pulling her into my arms and kissing her forehead. Lily rested her head against my shoulder, looking at the headstone with a soft, peaceful smile. Grandma looks happy here, Mommy. She is, sweetie. She's finally at peace. Lily took my hand, her small fingers wrapping tightly around mine. Are we happy now, Mommy? I looked out at the vast, blue ocean stretching toward the horizon. The weight that had crushed my chest for years was gone. The shadows of betrayal, deceit, and cruelty had been washed away, leaving only clarity and freedom. I was no longer the foolish girl who begged for love. I was no longer the helpless wife waiting in the dark. I was no longer an outsider in my own life. I squeezed my daughter's hand, a genuine, radiant smile breaking across my face. Yes, baby, I said softly, stepping forward into the warm sunlight.
We are.
Finally free.